And welcome back. Now I can actually see the stage chat again. So hopefully I'll be able to see the questions if there's any questions coming in. For the next section, we're going to start off with Laura Vass, who's a co-founder at Pronovix and who you might know from the DevPortal Awards and the API, the docs community. And she's going to be talking about the content DevPortal, who writes the docs. Hi, Laura.
Hello.
Well,
you can hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about a very pragmatic question, which is who gets the docs done? The information that I'm bringing is roughly from 3 sources. The DevPortal Awards that Christoph mentioned, this was created as a forum to explore and celebrate the exceptional innovations within the developer interface documentation, and then the API the docs conferences, where we just finished a Showcase Your DevPortal series, in which we invited DevPortal Awards nominated teams to tell us of the challenges that they are successfully overcoming or have already done, and to showcase the solutions that they are particularly proud of. The third source is that I'm also the co-founder of Pronovix. This is a company specialized in researching, designing, building, and supporting DevPortals. And I'm active in the research phase of all of this. We help companies who are sometimes just starting with their RESTful APIs, and we build then a system with their portals. The documentation we find is very important because it determines how successful the API program will be through how easy it is to use the API. In our interactions, we have seen that most of them still don't have tech writers. That's why we are doing research on how to help this, how to set up a team, the authoring, and the editorial processes. The materials that I'm about to share from Pronovix, they are all a fruit of a team effort, and they are enabled by the research and the collective knowledge of the entire Pronovix team. And I don't know if you recognize our MC, this is Christoph here, wearing t-shirts from the Write the Docs community, which I heartily recommend to check if you are looking for interesting sources. So a documentation effort, like every story, this has an arch, like this presentation. This is about API documentation, where the journey is mostly about character development, pun intended, through much introspection, at the end of which you still have to solve your original problem, but hopefully with a better mindset. So what is this issue that I want to pick at? We start out where you have an API. You probably also have a DevPortal, at least the first iteration. And then now what? The conflict is when you realize that not only was creating the API, designing it was 50%, but the other 90% is writing and maintaining its documentation. And by documentation, I mean the full documentation for all audiences, including status and legal and so forth. And by writing, I mean the whole cycle from research until metrics. And then there are the humans in the docs matrix. We each have our individual history, our preferences, and our constraints. So referring to the complexity theme within this track, what you have to maintain is not just complicated, it's actually complex. But let's still keep it that complicated. For anything requiring maintenance, we would need clarity on the scope, we would need explicit ownership, the fitting tools, and the streamlined processes. And if you take ownership as a responsibility, then you also deserve the appreciation for it. This list is actually the key takeaway from my presentation. So if you only want the moral of the story, the nutshell is API documentation is a mixed genre that will take a wide range of skill sets, the tools and the processes to be orchestrated for the benefit of many and different types of docs. It almost doesn't matter who it is, although someone might disagree, but somebody has to take the ownership and therefore the responsibility and the appreciation for the user experience of the DevPortal, and this includes the docs. And this team of a few or many or one person must know that they have this shared or sole ownership very explicitly. So beyond this summary, what I want to give you is DevPortal specific information on each of these first two, the perspective of the teams behind some award nominating DevPortals, and the words that they use to describe this ownership. So I will first shortly sketch the scope of the documentation on the portal, and then zoom in on why is a process and this ownership is actually necessary, or at least I think so. Then I will share some quotes from the teams on who works on their docs for the DevPortal. The examples are anonymized, and the data comes from the participants of the DevPortal Awards and the API the Docs conference series from 2021, where I was honored to be the organizer and the MC, so I could ask them these questions. On the tools and the processes, I will refer to some knowledge bases at the end of my presentation because that's beyond the 20 minutes. What can a developer portal be, and who are the stakeholders? I assume that because you're here, you have a developer portal, or you're thinking about having one. You might think that your dev portal is just a collection of some digital assets and documentation that offer some interfaces to your customers, partners, or vendors. If that's where you're at, let's try to expand your view a bit. An API portal is the interface between a set of APIs and their various stakeholders. It is where you publish your API documentation, but it is more. It can play several roles to achieve the business goals of an organization. It's a self-service hub where you have to provide your users all the documentation so they can find all the information themselves. You can use this portal to give your users the means to communicate with each other. And if you make great user journeys throughout your entire portal, that will establish trust with those users. Not everyone who comes to your portal is a deeply technical integrator. Program managers, business solutions architects will also come to learn about your offerings. You probably have more stakeholders than you might have initially thought or started with. At Pronovix, we have done extensive research into how API developer portals are used, what elements are necessary, and how to set up the information architecture to serve your users' best needs, the internal and the external users. Basically, we research user experience and apply it to API developer portals. Now, what do I mean when I say the docs on a developer portal? If you stop at, so here's the reference docs, and well, good luck, that will not be enough. What would be the minimum viable documentation for a portal? This phrase, minimum viable documentation, was coined by Mike Young, by the way. The user first meets the value proposition and the overview of the available options, and there's some form of check-in process usually. You need to provide the guide to at least get started, and all the essential information to implement and integrate with the API. A tryout option has become almost standardly expected by now. Should there be need for more, there has to be a way to find or ask for help. Now, we could call this the minimum. Beyond this set, the portals that are nominated to the DevPortal Awards, they are way beyond this stage. Consider the following list: general and API-specific business information, pricing, case studies, terms and conditions, policies, regional information, general and API-specific, status, changelog, release notes, any external sources, community news, blog, tutorials, conceptual information, go-live guides as you like them, SDKs, and all the ways that you can gather feedback. And then there's some other information types that would be restricted to internal users. One of the keys to changing anything, obviously, is to establish sustainable patterns that leads to the outcome that you want. Now, humans are special because we can show a larger range of interaction patterns and we can switch between these behaviors. But if you have an organization and they have already existing interactions, then certain behavior patterns are easier to implement than the others. Editorial services could be considered such behavior patterns, but they don't happen in a vacuum. They need to be adjusted to your company culture. Companies are not machines where you can just drop a new piece in and it will just work. You need to look at the whole system and the culture that informs the behavior of the system. In case of API documentation, one has to look at the whole docs lifecycle and cannot entirely separate editing from writing. Why? Because your contributors and your users have their own journeys, and the central editorial team can orchestrate the streamlined user journeys for them. The less friction, the better a user experience. So, who writes the docs for your API? Who owns the documentation? And ultimately, the developer portal. Is it you? How do you plan to scale that? What about the buzz factor? Or is the answer them? Who is that them? Do they know that they are the ones? If the answer is, well, everyone, how are all of the aspects orchestrated? For the sake of orienting and for methodical development, we are working on a maturity model for developer portals. Initially, we set up 3 dimensions. You will find these 3 dimensions reflected in the DevPortal Awards categories as well. This is developer experience, business maturity, and operational maturity. Like the first 2, operational maturity is also a sliding scale. That is probably hard to clearly identify at what point you progress to the next stage. But for the function of the model and as a thinking tool, we have set 3 stages. In the next few slides, I will share some typical snapshots from exceptionally well-done developer portals on how the teams answered the question we just asked: who owns the portal and who writes the docs? I invite you to check the specific words that they use and to try to notice that there are patterns. For example, the prospects use the developer portal to assess the data we offer and the suitability of our offerings for their needs. Customers use the portal to understand how to build integrations, track their usage, and manage the data returned by the API. The engineering is responsible for building and maintaining the platform and all the associated content. Or, most of the content on the portal is fully technical, but there are some areas where technical content meets business content. Then it could be that the documentation has several review cycles, whoever creates it. The portal content is managed by the team responsible for developing the portal, while the API product content is in the responsibility of the API product managers. Multiple teams are working on a business topic with difficult areas of expertise. You can have one dedicated cross-functional team that owns the portal and another one that owns the docs. Then you can have different business lines that consist of teams who are responsible for delivering the products. APIs are part of the products that these provider teams develop, so the API strategy has a decentralized setup. To ensure that everything comes together in the end, there is one team that acts as a central hub. Now, these would be the typical reports from how the exemplary, the best-in-class docs are done. But if you're in the beginning of your DevPortal content development, going through a phase change, consider, where are you in your DevPortal story? What is your aim and why? What benefits are there for each person and the whole group of them and their wider community with reaching that aim? Are there skills or knowledge not within the group who is responsible for the quality of the docs? How will you get that and more on the long run? I think that documentation issues often start at the creation of the thing itself that needs to be documented. What are the issues with creating the APIs to begin with? Why is it even a problem to document them? Why does writing the docs so often become a hot potato? A lot of teams are making one-off internal APIs because often a very particular API is necessary to do a specific integration. And then realistically, it's only going to be used for that one case and not be very well documented. Onboarding is often only happening in live workshops, and this in turn allows a fragmented and complex authentication process to linger on. At Pronovix, we are developing a model for the journey of the developers who build the APIs. And our research focuses mostly on the docs management now for this upstream journey. This helps us to think with our clients about how to improve the experience of the developers who build the API. This is especially important for internal use API because you may not iterate on the docs later after publication. Nevertheless, there is a human-driven element, empathy, with the reader's specific context that is necessary to explain them what something really is. You have to first explain the specific terms in your business. Say, what is the data exposed by the API, together with what you can do with that data and how. You need to get software developers, the business stakeholders, and the technical writers to decide and define your domain semantics first. This can result in a system that can last longer, it can evolve and scale better. However you populate your DevPortal, whichever technology stack is in place, there is creativity, hard work, writer's block, and imposter syndrome. There's that mythical long-term motivation and the teamwork of your colleagues involved. Your colleagues who are all individuals, like you are, struggling with their own domains of hardship, personal and professional. It is not easy or evident to pull and motivate the team to work towards excellent documentation or something that should just work. I heard in a presentation from Jordan Peterson that I coincidentally listened to a few days ago, this axiomatic ethical proposition that I copied here or paraphrased, that whatever extracts order from chaos is properly done if it's done in truth. And the trick is to get the process of moving forward toward the aim started, and then to have the humility to make course changes along the way as you inform yourself. This was said in relation to personal development, but I find it relevant to the question of this presentation as well. What I would like to add to that is to be explicit about who is responsible for the fullness and the quality of the docs on the developer portal, what part of it, and to make absolutely sure that they know of and they embrace this responsibility of theirs. I hope you got new insights and inspiration. All the appreciation is due to the DevPortal teams who share their achievements and best practices through knowledge sharing spaces, and our clients, and my excellent colleagues who also work on exploring and making DevPortal space better and better. There is much more research and empirical data to explore. You see on this slide some starting points I would recommend to your attention. If you would like to read about the latest research results or interested in developer portals, check out our newsletter. If you would like to share your API documentation challenges and solutions with others, then please find me. And if you want to talk about your journey, I would love to have you as a guest for the podcast. Thank you for your attention and the organizers of the API Days conference for the space to share these insights.
Thank you, Laura. So a question I wanted to ask is, like, you've been talking with a lot of people about their developer portals in preparation of the DevPortal Awards. Is there anything that really stood out to you that you thought was interesting to share with the community? Like, how do you get to like what's different in these teams, or what's really interesting that people have been talking about?
Well, since we're talking about the awards, what's very special about them is that they're awesome. But beyond that, most of the people that I talked to prepare the showcase series, everyone is aware of their strengths and what they don't know. And they don't try to cover everything alone, but they work together to deliver a whole, and they're continuously paying attention. And compared to years before, the feedback mechanisms built in, and not just collecting feedback, but actually reacting on feedback, has become much, much more fine-tuned and stronger, I think.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody would want to win an award, do you have any recommendations for them?
Generally an award, no. At the DevPortal Awards, I think choose the category well that you want to be awarded. Consider past winners. Look at what is the group that you're competing in, if you consider it a competition. And maybe check out the category description now and work up your way in the next 2 quarters to already be in motion towards those.
What was your favorite category in the awards? Like, was there?
Well, the editorial experience, of course.
Editorial? Yeah.
That's my pet peeve. Yeah.
And did you see the things you talked about in your presentation? Did you see those repeated in the experiences that people were describing?
Yes, but it's the other way around. So I'm bringing what I saw from there, but it was very, very obfuscated because this information is confidential.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think, well, we have 2 more minutes. Is there anything specific you would like to share still with the audience?
There were several slides that I didn't bring because I was afraid that I was going to be too long. Mm-hmm. So I was referring to the t-shirt that you were wearing in that prank picture that I shared, which was from the Write the Docs community. And I was talking about mindset. This is my pet peeve, but I really think that if you have the right mindset, then it almost doesn't matter how you get through to where you want to get to. You just need to know where you want to go and get your head straight. And I have very positive and long-lasting memories from presentations I heard at the Write the Docs conference that helped me with that mindset.
Mm-hmm. So mindset and then Write the Docs as a community to check out for people that don't know it yet. Here in the
and obviously API the Docs.
Obviously. Okay. Thank you very much, Laura.